Welcome back to the session 2 of perceptual video hashing. In the previous session, we saw what is perceptual video hashing, the desirable properties, applications, and some of the existing methodologies for obtaining the perceptual hash from the video. And then what is the motivation and the problem definition for our work. So the first algorithm that I have worked is based on radial projection techniques. To be very specific, three-dimensional radial projection technique. Here, the normalized video is treated as a cube of size alpha by alpha by alpha, alpha by alpha by alpha. Okay, so it is then broken into n randomly located overlapping subcubes of size 5 cross 5 cross 5. That means such that the subcubes cover the entire normalized video, and also make sure that the size of phi is less than alpha. For example, if I normalize the video as a cube of size 32 by 32 by 32, then I may choose the size of phi to be 16 cross 16 cross 16. Okay. Now, variance of all the pixels along the radial line is calculated. How? We'll see that. Now, before that, now suppose I consider this to be as one subcube. I consider a plane, an imaginary plane, and also an imaginary line, all passing through the origin of the center of the subcube. Now, we have this line. We rotate this line by 180 degree in steps of 1 degree such that it covers the entire plane. That means what? I am trying to cover all the luminant components that are lying on this plane by rotating the radial lines. Similarly, I rotate this plane in steps of 1 degree up to 180 degrees such that it covers the entire subcube. Okay, so now this plane line rotating on the plane covers the entire plane. This plane rotating in steps of 1 degree covers the entire cube. So thereby we are covering all the luminance components that are present in this subcube. Now, whatever the luminance components that lie along this radial line, we calculate the variance of those pixels. Okay, so now we have one line and one variance value. Now we are rotating this line by 180 degrees, so 180 times. So to cover this entire plane, we have got 180 values. Similarly, to cover this entire subcubes, we have 180 degrees of rotation of plane. So 180 by 180 leads to 32,400 variance values. The variance is calculated as sigma square is equal to 1 by nj, summation I is equal to 1 to nj. Li represents the luminance component of the ith pixel minus mu. Mu represents the mean of the pixels lying on the radial line. Okay, so this whole square. Now nj represents the number of pixels lying on the radial line, along the radial line. This is the mu value. So therefore, if I assume that the center of the subcube is at 0, 0, 0, then I get 32,400 variance values. So let me call this as an array of variance. Okay. Now, so we have seen how do we extract the 32,400 variance values from a subcube. Now let us see how this is used in extracting the perceptual hash from a video using three-dimensional radial projection technique. The input video is normalized in the sense we are converting an RGB video into a grayscale video. That's the first thing, because if I convert that, most of the energy lies in the gray component. So that is roughly around 93%. Remaining 7% of the energy lies in the color component. So 93% of energy we are utilizing it. That's in the first step. And also we may have different spatial resolutions and different number of frames, and these variations would affect the hash value, and hence to standardize it, to minimize the effect of these spatial resolution variations and the number of frames variations on the hash value, we are normalizing it both in spatial direction and also in the temporal direction. So that is why we are considering that video to be as a cube after normalization. Once we do that, depending on a secret key, we choose different number of overlapping subcubes. Now we select the subcubes such that it covers the entire cube, and for each subcube we apply three-dimensional radial projection technique. So by applying that, we get 32,400 variance values. Now suppose we have 32 subcubes, then we will have 32 array of variance, and each array of variance will have 32,400 variance values. Once we do that, there are different ways for how we go about this. Suppose I represent that 32,400 array of variance values as a vector for a single subcube. I have 32 subcubes, so I'll have the 32,400 dimensional vector, and there are such n vectors. So suppose there are 32 subcubes, so 32 vectors. So once I have done that, I will average it along the second dimension, that is along the columns. So once I do that, I get a single column vector of dimension 32,400 values, and still the dimension is very high, and I'll project this very high dimensional vector onto a one dimensional discrete cosine transform basis. Once I do that, after doing that, I'll select low to mid frequency coefficients, and then I'll apply median based quantization to obtain a binary hash vector. So here, if you observe that we had represented the array of variance as a single column vector. So there are 32. So 32 vectors were there. In the scheme to what we did was, now the array of variance was represented as a matrix, that is for 180. Remember, we had rotated this line in 180 times, so that corresponds to one column vector, and then we had rotated plane by 180 times, so that corresponds to each column vector. So we have got 180 by 180, so 180 rows and 180 columns. So that means we are constructing a matrix for a from the array of variance obtained from a single subcube. Now we have so many subcubes, so we'll have so many matrices. So on each matrices we are applying two-dimensional discrete cosine transform. The reason being is that since the variance values that we are calculating is along the radial lines, and radial lines are rotated just by 1 degree each, they'll have, because of the neighborhood, this thing, there will be high correlation, and hence they would carry the similar information. To capture those information effectively, we are representing in terms of a matrix and then applying two-dimensional discrete cosine transform on that. So like that, that is we have obtained one matrix for one subcube. There are so many subcubes, so we'll have so many matrices. Suppose I consider 32 subcubes, then I'll have 32 matrices. For each of the matrices we have applied two-dimensional discrete cosine transform, and hence we'll apply averaging, we'll perform averaging along the temporal direction. So we'll have one matrix left over after applying the averaging operation, and then we will vectorize it, that particular matrix that we have obtained after applying the averaging operation. Then we will select low to mid frequency coefficients value, average coefficients value, apply median based quantization to finally generate a binary hash vector for a given video. That's how we generate the perceptual hash from the video using the three-dimensional radial projection technique. These are nothing but the same explanations. So radial variance vectors for each of the subcubes. So there are n subcubes, so n radial variance vectors. Then we apply the one-dimensional this thing averaging. We have performed the averaging, and then after averaging one dimension, the average vector is projected onto one-dimensional discrete cosine transform basis. Select the coefficients, apply median based quantization to generate the binary hash vector. In scheme 2, for each of the subcube matrix, there are n subcubes, so n matrices. Each matrix two-dimensional discrete cosine transform, averaging along the temporal direction, because there are n subcubes, so n values, finally one matrix, and then after that we select the coefficients, apply median based quantization to extract to generate the binary hash vector. Okay, so these are the details of the database that we used. We generated the database from the TrekWid, OpenVideo, Refeed, and XIFEH. Okay, the number of videos is 1000. The minimum spatial resolution is 192 by 144. Maximum spatial resolution is 640 by 480. Minimum number of frames is 66. Maximum number of frames is 11,415, and the video format was in MP4. The spatial attacks that was considered was addition of white Gaussian noise with different variance values, Gaussian blurring, yes, again with different variants, average blurring with different mask sizes, brightness modifications, contrast modifications, cropping, different percentage of pixels were cropped from the border, rotation, different angle of rotations were considered, adding the watermark. In temporal attacks, regular frame dropping and interpolation, spatio-temporal attacks, compression, unwanted frame insertions, and reverse play. If you observe, we have considered both the content preserving operations and content changing operations. Content changing operations could be the unwanted frame insertion. Okay. Before that, once we have got the hash from the proposed method, we have to validate whether it satisfies the desirable property or not. If you remember, the desirable properties are, that is, it should be a one-way function, it should be a compact, it should satisfy the perceptual robustness property, visual fragility property, and unpredictability property. It is compact, yes, because we are having a short length hash vector. It is non-invertible because we cannot generate the video from the hash vector. Now the remaining three is unpredictability, visual fragility, and perceptual robustness. How do we check the unpredictability property? Now suppose I have a video. I will use 1000 different keys to generate the hash vector. So for a single video, since there are 1000 different keys, so how many hashes I have generated? 1000 different hashes. Now I'll try to measure the normalized Hamming distance between each of them. If you remember the property, even though the video is same, since the key used is different, the hashes should also be different, and hence the normalized Hamming distance between each of this should be on an average be around 0.5. Now I repeat the same process for the remaining videos in the database. I have considered 224 videos for validating the hash properties. So once I do that, I'll have the normalized Hamming distance value. I'll try to plot the histogram. That is, number of times the normalized Hamming distance was equal to 0.5. Number of times the normalized Hamming distance was equal to 0.4, and so on. Once I plot that, I get this. X-axis is the normalized Hamming distance values. Y-axis is the frequency. You can see that the mean is, this resembles the Gaussian distribution with a mean of 0.5, and it is distributed roughly around 0.3 to 0.7. So we can say that yes, the most of the values are concentrated around 0.5 as expected from the property. What about the visual fragility property? To check for the visual fragility property, we had considered 224 videos, and then using the same secret key we extracted the hash. Once the hash was extracted from 224 videos using the same key, we tried to measure the normalized Hamming distance between each of this 224 hash values, and then the values were noted down. And the process was repeated for the remaining 999 keys. We had used thousands secret keys to validate it. So once we have got it, we have plotted the histogram, that is how many times the normalized timing distance was equal to 0.5, 0.4, 0.3 and so on. Now you can, if you remember the visual fragility property, if the videos are different, then the normalized timing distance should be centered around 0.5, and you can see that yes, it again follows the Gaussian distribution with a center around 0.5, and we can say that most of the values are constant or gathered around 0.5 or centered around 0.5, with spread from 0.1 to 0.9 approximately. Perceptual robustness, if you remember, if two videos look similar to the human eye, then the normalized timing distance should be very close to 0. Yes, here in this algorithm the values are centered around roughly around 0.35, and that is towards 0. Now what we did for this was we had 224 different videos, and we had generated a similarly looking video, 224 videos, by adding noise and then blurring, like some of the operations that a video would undergo in any typical video processing applications. Once we have got 224 videos, similar videos, we try to measure the normalized timing distance between each of the similarly looking videos, and the values were noted down, and then the histogram was plotted. So x-axis represents normalized timing distance, y-axis represents the frequency. Now you can see that again it is centered, it is drifted towards 0. But when I overlap the visual fragility property and the perceptual robustness property, we will know that how much a misclassification occur. Suppose the green line, the blue line indicates that visually similar video, the histogram obtained for visually similar videos. The red line indicates the histogram obtained for perceptually different videos. Now if I say, suppose I have a threshold of 0.4, above 0.4 I'll classify it as different video, below 0.4 I'll classify it as similarly looking video. Now if you see that above 0.4 means there are still some videos which are very similar to the human eye, but the normalized timing distance between them is more than 0.4, so we are misclassifying it. Similarly, now suppose if it is less than 0.4, we tend to classify it as perceptually similar video. But if you see that the red line indicates that no, there are some videos, even though they are perceptually different, the normalized timing distance between them is still less than 0.4. So because of this algorithm, there is large number of misclassification because there is overlap between these two graphs. This is based on scheme 1. Similarly, for scheme 2 is obtained this. You can see that the unpredictability property, visual fragility property is centered around 0.5, whereas perceptual robustness property is shifting towards 0, but in this case it is around 0.35. And then you can see that yes, there are graphs for the visual fragility and the histogram obtained for visually similar and histogram obtained for visually different is still overlapping, and there are still large number of misclassifications because of this algorithm. But more or less it satisfies the desirable properties of the hash. The performance of the perceptual video hashing algorithms was evaluated using the receiver operating characteristic curves. It is the plot of the miss probability versus the false alarm probability. Now what is, say for example, if I am developing a near duplicate video retrieval application, what is the miss probability? Suppose two videos are perceptually similar, but if the algorithm says that no, it is different, we have missed that. So all those probabilities are calculated on an average, that we call it as miss probability. Now then, what is the false alarm probability? Now two videos are perceptually different, but if your algorithm says it is same, then it is a false alarm. Even though it is different, it is trying to tell, your algorithm is trying to tell that it is same. All these probabilities are calculated, so this corresponds to false alarm probability. Now if I want my algorithm to be robust, against content preserving operations, I want minimum miss probability values and minimum false alarm probabilities. And hence, if the area under the ROC curve is minimum, then we say that the performance of the algorithm is better. Now, here Gaussian blurring using a 9 by 9 mask size, what we have got. So these are the different algorithms that were considered, and you can see that for this the 2D rash has performed well, existing algorithms, but the proposed algorithm, radial projection technique, which is here, is also more or less performing compared to the state-of-the-art algorithms. But when it comes to the noise, because of the addition of noise, the variance values increases. But in the core of this, our algorithm depends on variance calculation, and hence because of noise, variance is more, and hence our algorithm area under the ROC curve is more in this particular case, that is in the case of noise. But the best performing algorithm is based on parallel factor analysis based video hashing algorithm. This is for single attacks. Now this is for multiple attacks. Again, you can see that yes, the proposed algorithm, video hashing algorithm based on radial projection technique is more or less performing is more or less performing comparable to that of the existing video hashing algorithms. But the best one is the Parafac, and the worst one is centroid of gradient orientation for the attack. What are the attacks? Increasing spatial resolution, 50% frame drop, and 5-degree rotation. If you remember, for the rotation attack, CGO performs poorly, and that is depicted here. And in this another multiple attack, Gaussian blur, unwanted frame insertion, and then the noise has been added. If you see that because of the unwanted frame insertions, because of the additive white Gaussian noise, the variance increases, and hence because of that the area under the ROC curve for the proposed technique is more, and hence it is performing poorly. Okay, so from this we can conclude that even though you are performing only the variance and mean calculations, but the number of calculations that you perform is very much, because 180 variance values for a line rotating along the plane, and the plane rotating along the cube is 180 values, so number of calculations are more, and the performance is relatively poor. Yes, for some attacks it performs compared to the existing methods, but for the most of the attacks the performance is inferior. Okay, so that was based on a radial projection technique. Now let us move on to the next technique, that is nothing but the random projection based video hashing algorithm. Okay, so before going to that, we have to understand what is the importance, or what is the idea behind the random projection technique. Now, if you remember, all the DFT bases, DCT bases, or any other transformations required the basis function to be orthogonal, because we want the recovery factor, that is the inverse calculation should be easy for us. That's why we always want the basis functions to be orthogonal. But the best thing about the random projection is that the bases are almost orthogonal. It's not orthogonal, but almost orthogonal. But some of you might think that okay, if it is not orthogonal, earlier we used to do Gram-Schmidt orthogonalization procedure to make the bases orthogonal. Now you may ask, should you do the same procedure here? No, not required. It is almost orthogonal, and hence here the inverse calculation is also easy. That's the best thing. But these basis functions, these random projections which has the basis functions, should satisfy the Johnson-Lindenstrass lemma. Now what is that lemma? Suppose I have a set of n points in d-dimensional Euclidean space, which is a high dimensional space. So I am considering n points in d-dimensional Euclidean space. Now as per this lemma, it can be mapped onto k-dimensional Euclidean space, which is a lower dimensional space, the same n points, without distorting the distances between any pair of points by more than 1 plus or minus epsilon. That is what, if I am mapping the n points from high dimensional space to the low dimensional space, the distances are preserved. That is, we are trying to capture the features in terms of distance preserved. So distances are preserved approximately. By how much? By a factor of, and there is a variation. By how much? 1 plus or minus epsilon. D represents higher dimensional space, K represents lower dimensional space, N represents the number of points. Epsilon can be treated as the error. So K is in the order of epsilon to the power minus 2 natural log of N, where K is very much less than D and epsilon lies between 0 and 1. And this U minus V, here we are trying to say that this is the L2 norm square between the points in the high dimensional space here, that is L2 norm square between U and V. F of U, F of V represents the points which are mapped from high dimensional space to low dimensional space. We are trying to again measure the L2 norm square between the points in the low dimensional space. So this is that. You can see that this is bounded by 1 plus epsilon times the L2 norm square between the points in the high dimensional space, and lower bounded by the L2 norm square between the points in the high dimensional space by 1 minus epsilon. To understand that with a simple scenario, suppose I have 3-dimensional space, which let me consider this as a high dimensional space, and there are 2 points U and V, and this is points in U dimension. So this is vector U, vector V, and this is the distance between the U and V. Suppose I have measured this in high dimensional space. Now I'll use random projection technique to map this points in high dimensional space to low dimensional space, so which are represented by F of U and F of V, and this, the distance from the origin to the point U is represented by F of U, L2 norm square F of U, a distance between the center or the origin to the point V, L2 norm square, that is of F of V, and the distance between these two is nothing but L2 norm square F of U and F of V. So approximately this and this are approximately same. So distance preserving random projection techniques. So out of, there are various random projection matrices that can be used. We are using the random matrices proposed by Ekloptas, and we are calling it as Ekloptas random projection matrix. This matrix satisfies JL lemma. When I say it satisfies JL lemma, it means that when points in high dimensional space are mapped to points in low dimensional space, the distances are approximately preserved, and we are trying to extract the features based on this. And the best thing about this random projection matrix is that it consists of only +1 and -1. It means that even though I am performing matrix multiplication, but it boils down to just addition and subtraction, so there is no multiplication involved. This has +1 and -1 with probability, equal probability. Now say, suppose this is a point in high dimensional space, say, which is RD, in dimension RD, and this is have a random projection matrix of dimension K by D, then the resultant operation will be a point in dimension K, which is represented as RK. So this represents the vector in high dimensional space, and this represents a vector in low dimensional space, and this projection involves addition and subtraction only. Okay, now how do we use this to extract the perceptual video hash from the random projection technique? The input video is pre-processed and normalized. The pre-processing and normalization is same, that is converting an RGB to gray video and then spatially resizing and temporally subsampling to obtain a video as a cube. Now depending on a secret key K, we select a different number of overlapping subcubes, and for each of these subcubes we apply random projection technique, because each subcube I can vectorize it from the subcube. I've got one vector. Now there are n subcubes, so there are n vectors. So each vector is of high dimensional space. So there are such n high dimensional vectors or high dimensional points. Now I can apply random projection on this because these are the points in high dimensional space. So after applying the random projection technique, I get n low dimensional n points in low dimensional space. Once I have got that, I can average it, perform averaging, then perform medium based quantization to obtain the binary hash vector. So to be very precise, H is the hash matrix, which is equal to 1 by root k r arm times f. F is the matrix which consists of vectors in high dimensional space, and this H is the vectors is a matrix consisting of vectors in low dimensional space. Again, using the same procedure, we are trying to validate the hash obtained through random projection technique. Now again, you can see that for the unpredictability property, on an average, the normalized timing distance is centered around 0.5, and for the visual fragility hash, the normalized timing distance on an average is centered around 0.5, and for the perceptual robustness property, as desired, it should be towards very close to 0. It is centered around 0.25. That means what? The performance of this algorithm is definitely better compared to the radial projection techniques, three-dimensional radial projection technique. But you can see that when I overlap the histogram obtained for the visually similar videos and also the visually different videos, there is still overlap, but the overlap is reduced very much, and hence there is less number of misclassifications. Okay, if you again take 0.4 as a threshold, above 0.4 I'll classify it as visually different video, and below 0.4 I'll classify it as visually similar videos. There is an overlap, there is a number of misclassification, but it has drastically reduced. So we can say that the performance of the random projection technique using Aklotov's random matrix is better compared to the radial projection technique that we have used. So to check that, again we'll use the receiver operating characteristic curve for different single and multiple image processing attacks. Here only for demonstration we have shown only some of the attacks. Again, the Gaussian blurring, again you can see that the one in yellow is the arm. Again, it is comparable to the existing methods. Again, for noise, you can see that it has performed very well. The previous method was poor, but this method has performed well. And for multiple attacks, yes, very much similar to the state-of-the-art algorithms. And even for the multiple attacks also, it is better compared to the radial projection technique. So we have got one improvisation over the radial projection technique. But if you observe, the computation was simple because it involves only addition and subtraction. Performance has improved, it is satisfactory, but definitely has a scope for improvement. So what we thought was, instead of applying dimensional reduction technique directly on the luminance values of the videos, why not again extract some relevant features from the video and then apply dimensional reduction technique so that we may get a better performance. So to really check whether do we get the better performance or not, see you in the next session. Thank you so much for watching the session 2 of the perceptual video hashing.